Hello, everyone, and welcome to Life Edge, because life just doesn't have to be mediocre. I'm Harold Muliati, co-hosting today with Dr. Susan Nash. And Susan, how are you today?
I'm great. And we're so lucky to have Alec Walker here again from DelfinSia because he talked about an amazing tool that converts structured into unstructured into structured data. Anyway, he's going to show us the tool. We'll see it in action.
All right, let's get going.
Cool. Thanks for having me on the show today.
This show is sponsored by Relate Corporation at www.relate.com, your training and video partner.
All right, and we're back. Sorry for cutting you off there with the intro, Alec. So
No worries. I forgot about that. That's a pretty cool intro. I was just saying it's good to be back on again, especially after an intro like that. I feel like I need to be holding a guitar or something.
Yeah. Hey, you're a drummer, aren't you?
I am, yeah. How'd you know that?
I think I just looked
Play too
up.
loud, I guess.
I just looked up to see if you had like a YouTube channel or something like that, and I think I found a video of you drumming.
Oh wow, yeah. I don't have too much time for it these days. It's a tragedy, but yeah, it's good to have a
I know
creative
the
outlet.
feeling about that. That's great, though.
And Susan, are you a musician as well, or?
Yeah, in fact, I could read music before I could read letters and
Wow.
words.
Wow, I still
So it's
can't do music.
I think that
so
worked my brain.
That's impressive.
I
Nice.
don't
Well,
know.
okay, so
But
so
I was always obsessed with it, but I haven't had much time lately either. So it's like, yeah, another tragedy.
yeah,
But it's interesting because I can kind of see that helps your creativity and helps you get to where you are now. And I'm really excited. Like next week, you're going to be in Houston. You'll be featured in one of our workshops. But one of the things you'll be talking about is your program that converts structured data. I keep getting it backwards, and it's like I know what it is. I just say it wrong. But
yeah,
unstructured to structured data, basically turning unusable data into stuff that can be used. And I just maybe for people who missed the first um, interview, you could tell them a little bit about it.
sure. Yeah, quick overview. So Delfin is the company, and Sia is the tool. And by the time we incorporated Delfin, the name had been taken. So now our company is called DelfinSia. So SIA is a smart interactive advisor, and that was an acronym that the first client came up with. And so that's become the name of the tool, and it really does three things. The first is it answers questions kind of like an enterprise search would. You type into a search bar, and I'll be showing this to you in a minute, this part of it, and you get back not just documents that contain keywords that overlap with your search, but instead snippets from within those documents that actually answer your question. And so it's about intent matching across what's been asked. It can autofill spreadsheets. So if you have row and column headers in a spreadsheet rather than a question, it can look through your unstructured textual files for what it thinks are the best answers and then stick those pieces of data into where they need to go in your tabulated database. And then third and finally, it can, this is a new feature for the tool based on what users have been asking us for. So it can go through your unstructured textual files like old PDFs and reports and that sort of thing and assign them tags. So this one is related to legal, and this might be more for drilling engineers, and here's something for geologists. And we've implemented that just because sometimes when we want to deploy a version of our tool to handle a specific use case, clients actually don't know which data to feed that model. And so we had to build something first that could classify, and then we can say, okay, for all the stuff that is in that specific domain for the use case, we can do the first or second thing. So that's how the tool works. Hopefully that was nice and quick. I need to get better at pitching fast, huh?
That was good. No, that captured it.
So do you think that would work for my 2-minute thing in the upcoming U pitch session?
Absolutely. In fact, I started to think, I wonder if that could write like articles for me.
Well, this is being recorded, so I'll just have to review this, and if I get nervous, I'll just hit play and like hold it out for everyone to see. Like,
Yeah,
Okay.
perfect.
yeah. So should we move right into the
Yeah,
actual demo?
now
I
we
know
know
last
how it
time we got
works,
to
I guess.
talking and never even showed it.
Let's jump
All right, so
in.
I'll share my screen here, and as I do that, I'll um, I'll explain the context of this particular application. All right, so refining online, see a demo. So refining online is something that my co-founders created back in like the .com days, like in the 90s.
We're not
And
seeing
the
your
concept
screen
was,
share just yet, actually, Alec.
oh, okay.
Yeah. Start.
Yeah, thanks for letting me know.
All right, now we see your screen share, and we just crop it a bit here.
And now
Perfect.
you should see the screen, hopefully.
We do.
All right, great.
Yes, this is great.
Yeah. So my co-founders put together something that's just an open refinery operations engineering forum about 15, 20 years ago, something like that, quite a while ago. And the concept was just, hey, there are all these people who've developed subject matter expertise in the area of refinery operations engineering. So we're talking about downstream oil and gas. And those people have knowledge to share, but they also have questions to ask of each other. And so people would just post questions in a forum and then reply with answers. There's all kinds of internet forums, and so you guys probably know what I'm talking about. And after there were enough Q&A pairs and we had started to get SIA going, we just stuck SIA on top of all of that unstructured text. So the various questions and answers that had been asked, just mash that all together into one big body of text, and now you can ask it questions and get back answers. So it's only as smart as whatever the data is that's inside of that system, but it can understand some of the intents that are asked. So if I ask something like, why is my amine unit foaming? So it'll reach into all of those documents, kind of like how an enterprise search would, except that it actually understands the intent of this question. And then I'm sucking up a lot of my internet bandwidth on this video call, so it's a little slower than it sometimes is. And all right, so for this question, and this is one that I kind of rigged up because I remember somebody asked this question once in a demo, and I liked the answer because it kind of does a good job of showing off how the tool thinks. But so why is my amine unit foaming? Okay, the part that it highlighted is here in yellow. If the pressure drop increases only at the period of foaming, the problem of foaming may be the result of this or of that. So I like this because it's conditional. And if I remember right, if I scroll down to some of the other answers it came up with, yeah. So degraded amine tends to foam more than healthy amine. This is another sort of conditional thing. Often when people are using this tool, one question leads to another. So they ask a question about why an amine unit can be foaming, they learn about degraded amine, and the next question could be something about that as they follow up. So you get the concept, right? You can ask a question and you're getting back your own information, but it's giving you highlighted portions of that it thinks is the best direct answer to your question or relevant information to help you research further.
Well, that's nice because then it instead of just putting it in like a text file that just has the snippets, at least it's in the context.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up. I can do a few more example questions, but I want to explain about the user interface here too, because it's not. There's still some extra real estate. We have this map of the world and sort of ones and zeros to make it look high tech here. When we deploy this for a customer, this is all something that they can change how it looks if they want. It doesn't really matter too much. But this little screen that moves around matters because if I ask another question, let's see, how does Catalyst deactivate? So Catalyst in refinery operations engineering, these are those, they're kind of like breakfast cereal, and you fill reactors with them, and they help to lower activation energy and push reactions you want done through to completion better. So let's say that we're researching an issue or multiple issues. We have this workspace here, and if I click back on where I came from, this is kind of the history of what I've asked. And then I can kind of like scroll through things, and I can download the file, the original file if I want, or I can maximize it in a new window. So it'll pull that up in a separate window, but if I click back on it, it'll bring me back to where I was before, and so I can have everything in one window again. So those are some of like the kind of design decisions that we've made based on user feedback as people have been playing around with this.
So which areas are you finding to be the most useful? I mean, which domain or subject matters?
Well, when we first got started, we thought, based on our experience with refining online, that it would be that same use case. So people in downstream, doing maintenance work or troubleshooting on pieces of equipment in a refinery setting or a chemical processing setting, maybe even further downstream than refining. But we've actually gotten a lot more bites in upstream oil and gas and some in midstream. And I'd say the most common use cases now have to do with maybe people are dealing with drilling, daily drilling reports. And daily drilling reports, a good chunk of them are tabulated. So it kind of looks like an Excel spreadsheet. But some amount of it is like free form. So there's just a big open field where people can type in paragraphs. And when they type in the paragraph, it's like between the hours of 8 and 9 or 9 and 10, here's what happened and here's why we think that's important. And that's necessarily unstructured. So then if you want to go through and try to like figure out what emerged and what patterns there are, or whether you've encountered an issue before and how you dealt with it, it's hard for a human to go through and do that search. And it's hard for keywords to handle everything. So you kind of need that extra step. So that's one example. Let's see,
I think another
exploration
good one
geology
would be core
is another one.
descriptions
Sorry, go ahead.
and descriptions of rocks and cores.
Yeah, for the exploration geology, that's for sure. Yeah, and production labs is another one. So often geologists in production labs are looking at cuttings or core, and they come up with these, here's some tabulated information about like the amount of smectites or, the how compressible the clay was or something like that. And that's all something that they can just put in a spreadsheet, but they also write often a lot of notes about this kind of stuff. And these lab techs are experts and they've seen all kinds of rocks. And so it's really useful for the operator that paid for that production lab to be able to come in and pull more information out of those notes. But yeah, in the exploration geology, it's often looking through their own files or somebody else's files when they're considering bidding on a new lease or making some sort of land acquisition. What's the total organic carbon and how mature is the source rock? And those kinds of questions have answers that are buried away in PDFs and other kinds of files.
That's so true. And then also coming up with understanding how to design the frac design using all the possible information, like Young's modulus Poisson's ratio, and then any kind of like fracture networks and microseismic, all sorts of things that are kind of just in different places, and just being able to bring them together in one document would be amazing.
Yeah, and that's so there's a lot of hype around artificial intelligence, and there are a lot of groups that want to capitalize on that hype. And so just to like kind of keep everybody grounded in reality, we've been working pretty hard on trying to get buzzwords demystified and standard best practices, kind of the awareness of those things raised across the industry. So I think there's sometimes this sense of dread that artificial intelligence is going to come along and just wipe out all the people who have mattered so long in their careers to the company that they represent. We're really far away from that. That's like some really sci-fi kind of stuff, If I ask a question like the ones I was just asking to our demo, I have to know what question to ask, and then it's on me to have the expertise to look through and say, this is relevant to my problem and this isn't. Similarly, it's hard for our tool to just know, here's what's important in your PDFs. Here's a nice
That's
summary
true.
of what you care about. They have to first tell us, here's what we care about, and then we can fill it out for them.
And I'm assuming, I saw there was a 5-star rating system for the results. I'm assuming that helps to train it to figure out what kind of things it's looking for when people ask certain questions, right?
Yeah, so that 5-star system, we still have that on the Refining Online, and that's because it's a demo, so it sort of demonstrates that training component. You're absolutely right. When we roll this out with the client, typically the tool is pretty smart out of the gate, and we're proud of that. It can come out kind of knowing what's going on and answering questions decently well. And a lot of that is automated on our back end. But every company is different, every team is different, every use case is different. And so we like to have somebody, ideally they're a subject matter expert in whatever the domain and application space is, on the client side, to play around with it a little bit. And they can do two things. When they ask a question, they can rate the results, and you saw that 5-star rating system. They can also rank them. So maybe they say, you know what, I see where you're coming from, but that result number 3 in our context should be result number 1, and they can click and drag it up. And then once they've done that a little bit, it has these cascading consequences across the tool, and that's the machine learning component. Then when they're asking a question and they say, okay, I like what I'm seeing here, this tool is ready, we can then roll it out to the general users. And we're we're proud about how fast we are in doing that compared to some of the other companies that are out there.
That's great.
Yeah, I mean, the goal is to get rid of that so that nobody has to train it. It's always a tougher sell to say, hey, this is a tool that can just survive in your company, and whenever you add a new user, no problem. Whenever you add new data into the corpus for that use case, no problem. We're already there, but where we want to go and where we're working hard to get is reducing the amount of training time, from right now where it is just a few hours down to no hours at all, and it's just working right out of the gate. Then we've got something that's truly scalable. But that's a limitation of natural language processing. It's very contextual, and that's why I think you find that there aren't a lot of companies that have nailed it across all industries ubiquitously and just have this one tool that can solve everything for you. Try asking Google Home a technical question.
Right. Well, so let's say that I'm a company and I'm just really curious to try it out. How do they contact you? How do I contact you?
The best way is on our website. So if they just go to www.DelfinSia, spelled the same way as it in that footer there. Oh, wow, nice. You guys have it pulled up. Then if you just scroll down to the bottom on that website, there's a contact us section. But maybe I'll regret this, but I'm just going to give my email out too, which is AW, so my initials, at DelfinSia.com, and we can stick that and these links to that form in the notes in this video once we publish it. So we're starting to get a lot of people reaching out to us, and so I'm starting to have more emails than I can handle, and so we're starting to have other people help me with that sort of thing. It's a nice problem to have with the growing startup.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you'll have to really look at your lead generation apps.
Yeah.
That's definitely a good problem. Well, so what do you think is the next step?
Well, there's a lot of debate about this because on the one hand, we're hearing from users of our tool and other tools that users typically don't like natural language generation. We're a natural language processing company, so we're looking at text that already exists and we're answering questions with that. Natural language generation is when we start to write our own text automatically based on what we've seen and that sort of thing. So natural language generation could be hey, write a report for me that is all the important stuff in these documents. And we're starting now to compete with the specific domain expertise of our clients directly. And it's hard for us to know better than they do, So there's some low-hanging fruit there that we can do if they know what they want and it's repetitive. It's kind of like how I said we fill out databases automatically. Well, sure, we can fill out reports automatically too if there's a nice template or something like that, or they can give us some clear sense of what matters in their use case. So we've kind of explored that, but it's kind of a slippery slope. Once we start saying, sure, we'll average all the numbers across all your files for you for whatever question you're asking, then they'll say, well, once you've averaged the numbers, can you then tell me where to drill next? Well, we could. It might not be the best answer though, because that's not contained directly in the text. There's a lot of like nuance, and that's where the human subject matter expertise still matters, and AI can't quite cut it yet. Another thing that we're considering.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I would just say that absolutely, and then also just the way that people frame the argument. I mean, it's going to take a while to train AI to I don't know. It won't take too long in certain kinds of arguments, but at least the presentation and the tone, voice, etc.
Yeah, and so another area we've been pushed towards is this kind of interactive chatbot sort of stuff, and we've tried to avoid that buzzword chatbot, because chatbot implies like, hey, how are you doing today? Oh, I'm good, Sia. How are you? And most users, in fact, all but a very scant few, are really not into that at all. They just want to use this as a tool to get their work done, and they have busy schedules and a lot to do, and they don't want to have a chat with something that is trying to pretend to be human. And it's a pretty hard problem to solve. I mean, there are a lot of groups that have poured huge resources into creating convincing chatbots, but we're not trying to convince anybody that Sia is conversationally intelligent in sort of a human way, in an empathic way. The closest we've come to that is for some of the applications that we're working on, is coming up with something that asks for clarification. So if somebody says, I asked that question earlier about Catalyst. I said, how does Catalyst, forgot exactly what I said, deactivate, something like that. It might come back in an iteration with a real client where we spent more time on it, and say, well, what kind of catalyst are you talking about? Deactivation seems to vary depending on what kind of catalyst we're seeing across the unstructured files. And that part can be automated, so the tool can at least ask for clarification. That's something we're working on pretty hard.
Or if it's misspelled or something.
Yeah, that, and we're hiring product managers. Yeah, so this is my oversight. I assumed that once we built this as a semi-scalable product, that it would kind of grow without the need for too much manpower on our side. And we could focus on the data science, and maybe we could have some marketing and that sort of thing. But a lot of the companies that we're talking to and working with and starting to work with, they like having more hand-holding. They like having a designated person to call if there's an issue. They're bringing new people into the tool, and it's pretty easy to use, but still they just want to have somebody to call, and they want to unroll a new application, and they want to talk that through and have somebody communicate with the lawyers, and even though we have the MSA or something like that. So we're having to grow our team bigger than we thought we would, which is cool. It's good to work with more people. It just means we have to raise more capital.
Right. That's all good.
Yeah.
Well, Susan,
so investors can contact you too.
Yes. Yeah. I'm new to this. Despite my business school and despite doing a lot of entrepreneurial things, I'm kind of new to this raising a Series A for a startup kind of thing. And my assumption was like, let's let them know we exist, but not really hit it hard until we're ready. Let's make sure we've got like the right boxes checked, and how many clients, and do we have references, and is there a demo? If they gave us a corpus, could we turn it around and give them something compelling right away? But probably I should have been knocking on doors and pushing a little harder all along. It's just like, you don't want to sell something you don't have yet. It just takes a while to get the investors to pounce.
Well, I'm on my phone and I'm getting kicked off this call.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
You've got a meeting to get to, right?
Yeah, and they're calling me.
Yeah. Well, so thank you so much for coming back on and showing us a little bit about how a DelfinSia works, Alec. And
sure.
Yeah, we'll be excited to see how it develops as time goes on.
Nice. Yeah, it's always fun being on here. And last time I didn't get to the demo. This time I didn't get to that corporate innovation methodology. But maybe then there'll be a next time. So we'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand if you're getting bored of me, but it's always
Oh
fun to
no.
come onto this stuff. I love the stuff you
No,
guys
this is
do. I think it's
great.
really cool.
Great.
All
Well, I'm
right.
going
Thanks
to
again.
say goodbye right now and sign off, but I'll see you later. And thank you.
All right.
Sure
See you,
thing.
Susan.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
All right. Bye. All right. All right. Well, thank you, Alex. Yeah, like you said last time, I guess you said that you were trying to show people that it's not a tool to do everything. It's not a tool to order you a pizza, right? But you're trying to fulfill this sort of Goldilocks market. It's a solution for specific things. Like you're kind of more specifically tailoring it to your clients, I believe you said, right?
Yeah. So natural language processing is one of those things where, you think about having the right tool for the job. If you have like a very, let's say a precision drill that is the right, drill bit size, then you drill the right size hole or something. I'm trying to think of the right analogy here versus just a big buzz saw that's going to cut through everything. So
Yeah.
we're kind of like that. It thinks more flexibly the more specific the application. And some applications, clients are like, look, we really want this and this and this together. And we say, okay, that's fine. And it takes us a little bit longer to set up. So we're kind of feeling that out right now. But yeah, generally, if the clients have a specific application in mind, that really helps.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So when you're kind of setting it up for clients, how are you actually training it specifically to? Are you just telling them like which data they need to what kinds of data they need to fill it in based on their needs, or?
Yeah, so that process typically starts with some kind of business need. If it starts with a general interest in exploring technology, then we like to push back and say, hey, I don't know if you actually want this tool or if it's just sort of like fun for you to consider buzzwords like AI or something. Let's start with a problem that people are facing that is a serious pain point that's attached to some kind of like P&L, that we can like really figure out here. And then we try to work together on figuring out what the ROI goal would be. So, say for example, people are making these decisions about, I'll do a geology example just for Susan when she watches this later, or if she does. So like, say a team is looking at where they're going to bid for the next lease and how much should they bid, and they have to do that by a certain deadline. The amount of unstructured data that they have access to has grown significantly in the course of the last decades since people have been doing this. And what we're hearing is a lot of teams are saying, gosh, we don't even have time to look through all of it, let alone process what we do have time to look through.
Right.
And that can result in us making the wrong kind of bid or missing opportunities where we should have bidded, we should have placed a bid. And that can have like really significant consequences. Okay, so let's take a snapshot before we implement about how decisions are made and what percent of data is people are looking at. And then let's implement the tool and then do a snapshot afterward and see the difference. And then we can measure the value that was created. So that method tends to work pretty well. And then you were about the training. This is sort of a necessary background for that. How do you then train it, right? So once you have that whole sense of the application and where people are going to go with it, then people can say like, here's the corpus of data that we're going to have to look through. It's too much for a person to deal with. And here are some questions that we've had to ask in the past. And it's not an exhaustive list of questions by any means. It might be 20, 30, something like that questions. And then once they ask those questions to us, then our tool can handle how those questions would give replies, and you train on those questions. And then it learns how to think more generally across that whole use case. So if you ask different questions that overlap in that use case domain, you're still getting back valuable answers, and we're good to go from there.
Awesome. And hey, I really like what you said about the business part of the decision, that you're talking to your customers and you're saying, hey, is this really the right tool for is this really the right situation for what you're trying to do here, and trying to figure out if they're going to get a return from using your tool, because that's That's just good. It's good business. That's how you form long-lasting
I
relationships
think
by.
everyone would regret it later, right? Yeah, there have been a few instances where a company has said, like, please, like, we built these internal tools, and they're very the teams that built them in a way that really works inside of our company, but they might not be built in a way that typically software companies would build a tool.
Hmm.
And then they ask us, hey, can you stitch these tools together and put yours on top so that people can ask questions of our tools and get back responses? And generally, we've said no to that. And the reason is because it would take us a lot of time, our man-hour sort of time, not automated sort of time from our machines,
Yeah.
to stitch those things together. And that's hard to. That's the sort of thing that we say, like, I think you should hire somebody internally to do that for you. And
Yeah.
here's the
What?
kind of person I'd recommend. And then maybe we can put our stuff on top. But typically, if it's already tabulated, it's not even that hard, right? Like, you can do that internally.
Hmm.
Maybe I'm
Yeah.
giving away secrets here, but like, I'd rather solve the problem that we feel like the industry is having trouble solving based on their core competencies currently. And there are some low-hanging fruit things where, like, you've got a tabulated, a bunch of data, and you just want to ask a question of that. That's not that hard to deal with. It's the unstructured stuff that's really hard. We can always answer questions from tabulated stuff. That's the easiest part of any corpus that we deal with.
Yeah. And you're right. Supporting your own product's one thing, but then when other stuff gets stuck together and you end up having to support some sort of Frankenstein together, then it really can explode the amount of time that you have to spend in making sure the thing's working right. We've kind
Yeah,
of
yeah, for
done some
sure.
of that in our own industry, and we know the feeling.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really tough. I think this is like, worldwide, this is kind of a challenge. There are these incumbent firms. Data science is showing what it can do. Data-driven decision making is showing what it can do. And so firms are trying to figure out how to handle that. Do you build it? Do you buy it? Which parts do you build and which parts do you buy? And how do you measure ROI? When you
Yeah.
deploy these teams, is it a core sort of center of excellence on its own, or do you put data scientists scattered throughout other teams? And then how do you handle getting them to talk to each other and create data pipelines that are shared across the organization? So many challenges to all this stuff, right? So we're trying to go to a place where, like, it doesn't really make sense for them to compete. It's kind of hard
Right.
for. It took us like an all-star team here 4 years, better part of 4 years, to build something that really works. And that's going to be hard. I think there's a head start, and so just use this one, right? And rather than try to make something internally that's going to be able to compete not only inside of your company but on the open market. The open market version of that is going to work better.
Right. Well, I mean, it seems like you've got some good heads on your shoulders, and you care about your customers, and I mean, so I think that's a good recipe for success right there. And like I said, we'd probably like to have you or someone else from the company on sometime later on just to see how your product comes along.
Yeah, that'd be fun. Yeah, there are a lot of great people in this company, and so I'm kind of the spoiled one who's getting the attention here. But my contribution to the product itself has been pretty small, compared to a lot
Well,
of
you
the
get to be
big
the
brains
mascot.
out there. Yeah, and they're plenty articulate too. The reason why I'm the one in front of the camera is because it's hardest for me to do what they're doing, not the other way around.
Right.
Yeah, so there's you're talking about caring about customers. There's a lot of bottom-up demand for this. Whenever we give a talk, it's always like the people who are really feeling the pain having to look through all that data themselves want this tool. And then they have to go become evangelists and talk inside of their own companies about, like, hey, look, unstructured data is a thing, and it's different from structured data, and it matters, and here's why we're wasting time, and here's why we're losing money or missing out on opportunities to make
Right.
money. And here's why things are a little bit less safe, or perhaps a lot less safe than they could be. There's all kinds of, it's about, are you saving money, are you increasing your amount of production, or are you doing things in a suboptimal, in terms of a HSE way. And if we can, convince the people who really want to use the tool about something like that, then I think it's time to do business. Otherwise, it's like, well, maybe we could help you feel better about your workday, but are we really driving value? And often it's not hard to find a way to show that we're driving value. It's not as hard as we thought it would be. This is it's a tough area, right? Like my analogy, and maybe
Yeah.
I said this last time, I like to say this, so fast forward me or interrupt me if I said this before, but selling this tool is kind of like selling the first ever BlackBerry phone. Imagine if you and I had created that first BlackBerry and we go to like a finance company and we say, hey, do you want to buy this phone? Finance company says, maybe, it looks interesting. What's the ROI? Like, if my people can check their email on the go, so what? What value does that create for me? And it's hard to draw bounds on that, right? Like, what value does it create? If you're better informed for your 9 a.m. meeting because you were checking your email in the cab in New York on the way to work or something like, that could help. But how much is that worth? Well, maybe not too much. But if there's a deal that you missed out on because you were still in the cab and you could have gotten in on that deal, that's worth quite a bit, right? And so you have to kind of think creatively about this, and you have to like have measured or start measuring. We call it a snapshot, before and then after. How are things currently happening, and where are there lost opportunities? And assign some metrics to this stuff. How long does it take people to get stuff done? Are they doing a thorough job? Are there reinventions of the wheel and that sort of thing?
Exactly, and I guess, like you said, when you're the first one in, then while there's going to be a return, but it's kind of hard to tell because there aren't the examples that already exist for you to say, well, look at this. This is how much such and such company was able to get because they implemented this.
Yeah, and unfortunately, there's a lot of like eyebrow-raising, skepticism-inducing reports out there about like AI was able to, save $400 billion worth of stuff. It's like, well, okay, how you calculate that is like sort of liberal. You know what I mean? There are a lot of organizations that are pretty creative about how they show what value they created for their clients. And if the client likes the tool and wants to justify internally that the tool needed to exist, then they can kind of be on board with that creativity. But there really is real value here, and the use cases I'm talking about are real use cases where people are like very excited to have this solution, and they are saving real money. Sometimes it's harder to measure and sometimes it's easier to measure, but in no instance yet have we talked to somebody and gotten something started that they didn't actually want to use. Yeah, or didn't feel, everyone's felt good about having implemented on an ROI sense too.
Awesome. I see. Yeah. All right. Well, I think we're about out of time, and like I said, we'll probably see if we can have you on again sometime later on down the line. And thanks again for coming on, Alec.
Yeah, sure thing. I'll see if I can pull somebody else away from behind a computer so that we can get somebody else on here too. Because anybody who does work with us winds up meeting more than one person at least on this team. But yeah, I really appreciate it. It's great to have an opportunity to chat about this stuff, and it's cool that this will just be out there for others to see. We want to be as transparent as we can.
Yeah. All right.
All right.
And,
cheers. See you next time, or somebody will.
See you next time, and thanks everyone for joining in, and we'll see you next time on Life Edge. All right. Bye, everyone.